Hello, I'm Kevin Frank. This is September 1st, 2020, as fall approaches. Once again, we have Dr. Jeff Andresen with us to provide an update on what we're seeing right now and a little bit of probably what some of that rainfall was we were blessed with last week that helped out. So go ahead, Jeff.
Will do. And I'll bring up my the theme. There's a real good, a very consistent theme, and I'm starting with it on here, my lead page, and that is we're looking at some early fall weather. There's just almost no way around it, and actually some changes or almost reversals in some earlier forecast information that we looked at, but I'll get to those later. That's further out. But on the front here, I've got a jet stream map. It's just actually looking ahead a week, Wednesday of next week, and you can see a big trough carved out over the middle of North America. And this looks an awful lot more like the cold season than it does the warm season. Again, we've talked about these big features, both ridges and troughs that we've had in the upper air across the Midwest this year. Well, this is no exception to that, but a big trough here. And on the right-hand side here, these are temperature anomalies just above the surface, one of the lowest layers of the atmosphere. And as you can probably guess, the blues and purples are all below normal or colder than normal. And the red, brown color here are all above. And you can easily see here, again, some meteorology. We see this every week after time. But underneath the trough, you've got just colder than normal temperatures, airflow right out of Canada. And then under the ridge, the opposite. You've got subtly subtropical flow, and you can see, especially for the West Coast and for portions of the East Coast, expected to be warmer than normal next week. And that is that's been a consistent theme in the outlook, at least in the medium range for a while. And right now there's never a guarantee, but this is a pretty close thing to it. And so we're looking at an extended stretch of cooler, and depending on what you believe, what guidance you believe, may be more active than normal. I'll get to that when we get to the medium range. But let's look at the past week here first. A little bit of interesting here as you look at the states, some north to south differences in mean temperature, actually a little cooler than normal up in the Keweenaw and the western portion of upper Michigan here, a degree or so below normal. But in this lower peninsula, and especially the southern lower peninsula, more of the same old, much above normal, 3, 4, even 5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal here was the average for the week. Bigger story, as Kevin mentioned here, was the precipitation, and many areas got some much needed rainfall here across southern lower Michigan. You can see lots of 1 to 2 inch totals for the week. Obviously, it was much needed. It actually it was needed earlier than that for many people. There still are, though, I'd like to point out too, in the blues here, the blue is less than half an inch. There's some spots, especially down here in the southern tier or 2 of counties, that were still missed repeatedly. And I actually watched the radar just avoid some of these areas. It just is horrible luck. And there, the dryness, the acute dryness, still remains as a serious problem. It actually still is a problem in these other areas as well, but certainly things have stabilized from where they were last week in many parts of the southern half of lower Michigan. Degree day totals for the season here, still most areas still running well ahead of normal, several days to more than a week. That's not surprising given the temperature departures, and we may see some changes in that, though, over the next 2 weeks given the forecast. We'll see. Interestingly, we saw the precipitation. The U.S. Drought Monitor, and again, this is somewhat out of date from last week. It's the most recent one. It's the current version of this, but you can see that it did expand last Thursday, into much of the southern half of lower Michigan, including some D1 moderate drought here over southwestern portions of the state. But it's safe to say, again, there are many areas in the southern half of lower Michigan, especially on well-drained, coarse-textured soils, that have had problems for several weeks, going all the way back to the middle of summer. And we had an increase, at least officially here, up to about 36% of the state was in D0 or D1. That's a huge increase from the previous week. And given the rain that we've had here recently and what's expected, we'll again probably see some stabilization in that for this week. But at least last week, it did reflect the problems with dryness that we do have especially over many southern parts of the state. In the forecast here, A little bit of an active pattern here, especially for the southern half of the state. And we did this last week, and it hasn't been that common this season, but lots of differences whether you're in the northern or the southern part of the state. And at least for now, we've got a frontal boundary running across really the southern half, right through the middle of the central part of the lower peninsula. And that's going to set the stage for some showers and thunderstorms developing here later today, especially as we get towards peak heating, late afternoon, early evening, and then continue into the evening into the early morning hours before they end. But further north than that, once you get to the northern lower and into the UP, probably remaining dry here today. It's seasonably warm. Temperatures still actually fairly close to the normal, near 80 for high temperatures in many areas. Will be a little bit warmer than that tomorrow and Thursday before it takes a change. But again, right now, the next 12 to 24 hours is the next best chance for rain across the southern part of the state. It'll be different from that in the north. Down here in the lower left with the radar time lapse, you can see this area of convection out here, Illinois and down into Missouri, the Ohio Valley. That will approach here again later today. And we should see showers and thunderstorms gradually develop along this frontal boundary here, and then spread both north and south from that. It'll primarily be the southern half of the lower that has the action or it has the precipitation. Rainfall totals with this will depend on where you are, quarter to half an inch where you do get rain or a little bit of thunder, to maybe, well, there will probably be some areas that are missed. It's not a sure shot, but most areas will pick up a quarter of an inch with this before all is said and done, and it should be over by the early morning hours towards dawn tomorrow. So by tomorrow morning, you can see that frontal boundary has shifted a little bit to the south and east. Still maybe a couple lingering showers in the far southeastern part of the state. That'll be the last of it before it moves to the south and east. And then another frontal boundary here approaches from our north and west, enters western Michigan. This one, or western upper Michigan. This one has almost no moisture to work with, though, so it will primarily just be a wind shift line as it goes through, and there's not really that much cool air behind it as well. On Thursday, yet another weather system approaches. This one does have a little bit better dynamics. You can see there's an area of low pressure here just over southern Ontario with another cold front. And so I mentioned differences between the north and the south. Starting on Thursday, this starts almost a daily chance for scattered showers across northern lower Michigan. And it won't be our northern lower and the upper peninsula, not across the south with the southern half of the state, fair and dry for the remainder of, well, the end of the work week, end of the weekend. But northern Michigan, we will see almost a daily chance, 30, maybe 40% tops at best. And a lot of areas will remain dry, but the continuing threat will be there pretty much on a daily basis through the weekend. And behind this is where it starts to get interesting in terms of our weather change and what's coming or what's headed here. That's cooler air. And so by Friday, we will see a noticeable cooling off as the Canadian air mass moves into the Great Lakes region, and we'll see temperatures drop off 5 to 10 degrees. So moving from highs in the mid to upper 70s north here, days, and then low and mid 80s south, we will be in the 60s for highs in the north, mid and upper 60s, and then low 70s in the south. So fairly noticeable change. Low temperatures dropping into the 40s north and some low and mid 50s south. So quite a noticeable decrease in temperatures, and will stay there through the weekend and into early next week. Now, for the southern part of the state, which I mentioned will be pretty much dry after tomorrow into the weekend, next chance for rain there, probably not until late Sunday or Monday, as it looks right now. And then again, the medium range guidance is suggesting maybe a little bit more of an active type of weather pattern with more frequent chances for rainfall, along with the cooler than normal temperatures. But right now, especially for temperatures next week, you can probably put a pretty high probability on the cooler than normal weather. That looks like a really, really strong bet. Precip totals here for the week through next Tuesday morning, you can see generally in the quarter to 3/4 of an inch category. In the southern part of the state, of course, most of that will be here overnight tonight and into tomorrow. Across the northern part of the state, that'll be spread out over several days into the weekend, but not too far away in terms of the totals versus normal. And it actually is a little bit aggressive, but again, across southern parts of the state, there's still a chance that we won't see some of the relief that is needed there in those areas that have been missed over the last 2 weeks. Potential evapotranspiration rates here for the upcoming week, given cooler than normal temperatures forecast, are forecast to also fall off to a little bit lower than normal, from about 0.12 of an inch on average per day across the far north to about 0.15 of an inch in the far south. So a little bit below where we typically would be for the first week in September, and again, most of that's due to the cooler temperatures. So looking at the medium range, big, and this is a consistent theme. We saw this last week as well. You can see the upper air pattern here, just like we saw on the title slide. That shows up in almost all the model guidance. So again, the confidence in it is very, very high. But with that kind of an upper air pattern, you don't have to have much imagination to see all the cooler than normal temperatures. One thing though to note is that the core of the coolest air, or the largest departures, is really off to our west, out over the northern Great Plains, parts of the western Corn Belt, but it's just really, Michigan's not in the core of this. There's some hints in the 8 to 14 day time frame, which looks almost like this, almost identical to this, except the center of the coolest air shifts a little bit to the east, including Michigan. The other big news here, and we saw this also last week in the medium range forecast guides, you can see very high probabilities of above normal precipitation. Same thing carries through for the 8 to 14 day time frame. The model guidance has been very aggressive with this. I would note over the last week to week and a half, and it hasn't completely panned out that way. So I wouldn't say take it with a grain of salt, but I think that there's a chance that a lot of the precipitation, which is indicated here, especially on the 6 to 10 day time frame, some of that may actually be further south across the Ohio Valley. We'll see as that comes through. But there will be more frequent chances for precip than we've had, but I'm not completely sold on this based on what we've seen over the last week. The model has consistently been calling for above normal precip, and in some cases we haven't gotten it. So that's my reflection on that, but it's certainly consistent between the 6 to 10 day and the 8 to 14 day time frames. This is the new updated 1 month outlook for September, and if you remember this particular product from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, it's issued once, typically in about the third week of the month. That's when the initial issuance comes out, and then it's updated at the end of the month based on the latest, mostly medium range forecast guidance that's available. And what I want to show here is something, well, the forecasters don't like to see, but it is what it is. But there's been a big change in the September outlook. And the initial outlooks, again, these were released on the 20th of August, so not that long ago, a week and a half ago. You can see that Michigan's firmly in this sort of orange increased odds of warmer than normal temperatures, along with the EC, or equal chances category for precipitation. Well, on the right is the new updated version, and you can see a lot. Well, especially for temperature, you can see a lot of what we just saw with the medium range, and that is they've shifted now to more of cooler than normal mean temperatures for the month. They've also backed off, interestingly, on precip. That's the one I found really, really interesting. You can see the below normal covering a large area favored here over a lot of, well, the Intermountain West into the Great Plains, and then all the way over again as far east as Michigan. But a big change, or a fairly significant change from where we were before. We don't see that very often. But I think it is worth noting. One thing that you would conclude seeing this typically is maybe a little bit less confidence than one might normally have here, but it does, especially that temperature outlook, follows very, very closely from that medium range forecast guidance you just saw in the previous slide. So at least that's the direction that we're headed. Most of it, the medium range, for what it's worth, it does suggest that big troughing pattern that we've got in the middle of the continent, it reduces, or it moves off and de-amplifies by the middle of the month. So right now, for a change, maybe the middle of September, maybe into that third week where we move into something different. And remember, beyond that, all of the long lead outlooks are still calling for warmer than normal mean temperatures. So it's a fairly major difference from where we've been. So summarizing here, again, rain developing over the southern part of the state here later today and tonight. That's the next best chance for rain, and then it'll be dry for several days. In the northern part of the state, dry today and tomorrow, and then showers developing, or chance of showers starting on Thursday, continuing on a daily basis really into the weekend. And the other big news is a fall off in temperatures after the next couple of days. We'll be warmer than normal here through Thursday, and then after that frontal boundary moves through during the day on Thursday, about 10-degree drop in temperature back to below normal values. And high temperatures, again, northern parts of the state won't be out of the 60s for a few days, and lows in the 40s. So it's going to feel a lot more like fall than it does late summer. And that's pretty consistent also with the medium range forecast guidance. So it's not the last of it we've seen, probably continues on into around the middle of the month or so, at least, before another change. And then finally, as you just saw, that also has influenced a change in the outlook for the month of September. While the fall is still considered to be rated as warmer than normal in forecast, September, at least right now, has really changed just in the last few days. And so I'll wrap up there, Kevin, and turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Couple things I just wanted to acknowledge. I think as we've seen these temperatures moderate, we got that rainfall. I know we've already got some reports of grub injury out there, of Japanese beetle grubs being active. And I think, especially for those areas that were unirrigated, if you got the return to rainfall and you notice some areas that aren't greening up, it could possibly be grub injuries. That's something just for turf managers kind of keep a lookout for. And I think generally, your forecast, when you look at being cooler and maybe drier now, the cool is certainly much welcomed. Unfortunately, maybe we'll get some rain out of this, and we'll be able to make it through without getting back to these really dry conditions that we suffered through, at least many areas, especially down this part of the state in the last couple months.
And we should, over the next 24 hours, we should pick up some more rain. We here locally in Hazlet, in my gauge, I had about 1.5 inches over a 3-day period, and that was the most rain we've had almost in 7 weeks here. And it certainly has stabilized things. But you see glimpses of how much water was limiting on some of the trees. We're starting to see some early senescence and leaf drop and some other symptoms earlier than normal, and certainly in our field crops or annual crops. There's no question here locally. You can see the impact of the dryness, and it really shows up on those sandy soils, which we have in many spots. So hopefully we'll get some water here in the next day that should help. And as you saw with the cooler temperatures, also the water demand rates will be down less than they have been too.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate it. And we'll be back hopefully next week for another update. Thank you.
All right, you bet.